Hi, it's Katrina.
The original Book of Witchcraft. The original book on witchcraft delves into all kinds of dark arts, magic, and theories of doom. This ancient book is currently housed at the Library of Congress. It's called The Discovery of Witchcraft, written in 1584 by Reginald Scot. The book was so shocking when it came out that it outraged King James I because it was so heretical. And yet this book on witchcraft, which was published originally in English, became influential in the coming years when it came to practicing magic. Shakespeare researched this very book for the scenes he used with witches in Macbeth. Stage magicians have plagiarized and consulted the publication for hundreds of years. And today, its dark secrets have been transferred to the internet for the world to see. The book was groundbreaking for its time as an encyclopedia on magic and spells, and also juggling. The author consulted dozens of previous grimoires, or books on science, tales of the occult, and everything he could get his hands on to create the most impressive compendium of the day. But here's where things get interesting. Reginald Scot described witches not as evil, but as very capable women who practiced folk healing and sleight of hand. He also claimed that their miraculous feats weren't wicked at all, describing a witch not as a consort of the devil, but as a wise woman. But his book went on to be plagiarized and twisted in such a way that the original message was lost, and within just a few years, witches were regarded as evil once again, and people were using the spells in the book for all kinds of shenanigans. The Codex Higas. The Codex Higas is also known as the Devil's Bible. It's a huge book, mysterious, ominous, and a little bit creepy. It is in fact the largest medieval manuscript ever written, believed to have been made by a single monk living in Bohemia, in what is today modern Czech Republic. It has 620 pages, it's about 3 feet tall, and there is a devil hiding inside of it. The book was written in the 13th century and stored in a Benedictine monastery. The unnamed monk who wrote it included the New Testament and the Old Testament, as well as other more curious texts. Things like exorcisms, medical practices, and even proper grammar rules. Everything in this book is handwritten, and given its large size, experts say it probably took the scribe about 10 years to finish, although nobody knows for sure. It could have taken him up to 3 decades. The Codex Higas, which literally means giant book, is simple enough to understand as a medieval translation of the Bible, thrown in with some other random information the monk probably thought would be useful. But the mystery comes in the fact that there is a random page in the middle of the book with absolutely no explanation showing the Dark Lord of Hell. There is a fully colored rendering of Satan, seemingly for no reason. The picture takes up an entire page and probably took the scribe weeks to fully color, and yet there is no explanation for why the scribe went through all of the trouble of creating his own devil. The legend goes that the monk was sentenced to death unless he could make this amazing book, but there was no way he would have time to finish it, so he sold his soul to the devil in exchange for his help. Do you believe this story? Let me know in the comments below. The Book of Forbidden Knowledge. When it comes to forbidden history, no book is quite as forbidden as a piece of work literally called the Book of Forbidden Knowledge. It was put together towards the end of the 1800s by a mysterious individual, or maybe even a group of people. The book contains various manuscripts that were all written in the 1800s, all pertaining to different aspects of the occult. And this means mesmerism, black magic, talismans, ceremonial magic, demonology, fortune-telling, and even folk healing. It's less of a book and more of a modern grimoire filled with all the forbidden knowledge of the Victorian and Edwardian periods. It's not that ancient, only dating back to when the first edition was published in 1910. But there really is no legitimate book out there that contains as much raw information about the forbidden arts than this particular collected tome. Plus, you can actually buy a copy from pretty much any online bookstore and teach yourself all the forbidden knowledge your heart desires. The Necronomicon. Is the Necronomicon even real? And for that matter, what is it? It's become a symbol of dark magic and insanity in popular culture, showing up in horror books and most famously in the Evil Dead series of movies, in which the book is used to summon demons. But is the movie book based on something real, or is it all just theater? The Necronomicon is allegedly bound in human flesh, with its words inked in blood. It's filled to the brim with spells used to summon ancient monsters, raise the dead, and do things that seem pretty obviously impossible. The biggest issue with the Necronomicon, if the stories are to be believed, is that it causes whoever uses it to go completely insane. In some cases, it will even kill whoever reads it. The tales as we know them claim the author of the Necronomicon was Abdul al-Azred, also known as the Mad Arab. It's reported to be over 1,000 pages long, and yet not a single copy legitimately exists. This is probably because the Necronomicon doesn't exist. As much as we all would love to believe in a book that can summon monsters from other dimensions, it doesn't seem to be real. The Necronomicon was a product of author H.P. Lovecraft, who claimed he got the idea in a dream. He first mentioned it in his 1924 short story, The Hound, then continued to reference his imagined demon-summoning book in one story after the other. It was never actually based on any real Book of the Dead, but rather on Lovecraft's own idea that the things we don't understand are far more terrifying than the things we do. The wonderful discovery of witches in the county of Lancaster. If you've ever wanted to know just how serious witch trials were back in the 1600s, a book called The Wonderful Discovery of Witches in the County of Lancaster is right up your alley. This forbidden book details witch trials that took place between August 18th and 19th, 1612. Today, these events are known as the Lancashire Witch Trials. Out of the 20 men and women who were accused of being witches, 11 were found guilty and hanged. One of them was sentenced to stand in the pillory, while the rest were acquitted on the charges. And for those who don't know what a pillory is, or rather was, seeing as we don't use them anymore, it was a device erected on a post with holes for a person's head and hands. It was a kind of public humiliation. The person was made to stand on a podium with their head and hands stuck in a wooden block. While they were stuck there, the townspeople threw insults at them and even physically abused them. The reason this book exists at all is because the clerk at the trials, Thomas Potts, was ordered by the judge to write a full account of the proceedings. This made them the best recorded witch trials in the 17th century. The account was even submitted to the judges, who then tinkered and corrected the manuscript before publishing it in the form of a book. The historian Stephen Pumphrey has suggested that the judges manipulated the story told by the clerk to both protect and advance their careers, reforming what was literally a witch hunt into a legitimate trial. The Wonders of Creation. An early Persian manuscript on magic and astrology is currently being held inside Princeton's Department of Rare Books and Special Collections. It's called The Wonders of Creation, and it's a fully illustrated manuscript that includes spells, incantations, and talismans. What's truly fascinating about this forbidden book is that included are 56 painted pictures of both demons and angels. The book goes into great detail about the 72 main demons associated with the zodiac signs. While the zodiac may be popular today in a more innocent kind of way, in the past the zodiac was regarded as something significantly more evil. Zodiac demons were supposed to be beasts that cast spells and incantations to harm humans. The book even goes into detail about which ailments are caused by which demons and how to exorcise each specific one. For example, if a person wasn't feeling well, they were almost certainly possessed by a demon. The book shows instructions for sorcerers to take a handful of soil from underneath the feet of the person possessed, then to repeat an incantation 7 times that goes something like this: God of heaven and earth, hurry, bring back the love for virtue. And by completing the spell, the person was supposed to get better, and the demon was supposed to leave. And when it comes to a lot of these ancient forbidden books, these are the types of spells we're talking about. They seem a bit silly now, but this was how people dealt with their problems hundreds of years ago. If you could get your hands on this forbidden book, would you try out some of the spells? Let me know your thoughts on ancient mysticism and witchcraft in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. We've got lots more videos coming up. The Pikatrix. The Pikatrix is a manual on how to construct talismans, how to properly mix magical compounds, and how to summon different spirits depending on the astrological conditions. This book also happens to be the cornerstone of what we view as Western esotericism today. It details magical ideas all the way from antiquity to the modern era. Its original text was compiled completely in Arabic, with the information taken from over 200 sources near the end of the 13th century. Afterwards, the manuscript was translated into Castilian Spanish, then Latin, and finally into English. But Pikatrix is more than just spells. It's a full breakdown of medieval magic, as well as philosophy, medicine, and science. Modern translations of Pikatrix have turned it almost into a history book on astral magic, practical magic, and very real rituals that can even be done today. In truth, there is nothing inherently evil about the spells and rituals in the book. It's more of a guide to folk magic and traditional healing, and for these reasons it was widely forbidden for centuries after its initial release. Malayos Maleficarum. In the year 1486, the clergyman Heinrich Kramer published the most popular medieval text about witchcraft, the Malayos Maleficarum. It wasn't received very well at first, and in fact the author ended up getting chased out of Austria. After his book was published, he tried to start his own witch hunt in the town of Innsbruck and was kicked out by the local bishop. But what was done was done. His book was in circulation, and seeing as it discussed some pretty horrendous things about witches and satanic worship, it spread fear throughout Europe all the way until the 15th century. The book was kind of like the soil for the new idea of violent, malevolent witches consorting with the devil to take root, because before this, satanic witchcraft wasn't really a thing. Sure, people in Europe believed in witches even before the Romans were around, but in the Middle Ages, people didn't really care that much about them. They believed in monsters, fairies, and magic, but they didn't spend their days terrified of witches. There is even a church document written in the 10th century that suggested witchcraft could be real, but it also said that there wasn't much chance that groups of witches were flying around at night causing chaos. Things started to change in the 12th and 13th centuries. European writers started telling stories about witches. They were saying that they summoned demons, they had blood orgies, and they murdered babies, and that they ate human flesh. The stories spread and started to cause chaos, and then the clergyman Heinrich Kramer's book really helped the notion to take off. By the 15th century, witch hunts were prevalent in Europe. About 50,000 people in total were executed for practicing witchcraft before the Salem witch trials in New England put an end to it once and for all. The Book of Soyga. The Book of Soyga is a 16th century manuscript on demonology that was written in Latin. But the reason it's so mysterious is that we have no idea who actually wrote the book. All we know is that a man named John Dee, who had been an English mathematician and astronomer, as well as the advisor to Elizabeth I, allegedly acquired the book in the 1580s. He then spent the rest of his life trying to decipher its strange secrets. John was fascinated with the book. It details spells, magical formulas that he couldn't understand, and the different hierarchies of angels and demons. But by the time he died, he still hadn't finished deciphering the final 36 pages. These pages contain tables of random Latin letters that he took to be a coded message. He never could figure it out though, and after his death, things started to get really weird. A close friend of John's, Edward Kelly, claimed that he used the book to summon the archangel Uriel, who then informed him that the book wasn't actually written by anyone, but came into existence when Adam entered paradise. He said the only person who could decipher the book would be the archangel Michael. But the angel never did reveal the secrets of the book to humanity. The book vanished in the late 1610s. But wait, because this story gets even crazier. The Book of Soyga was discovered 400 years later, hiding amongst piles of dusty ancient books deep in the British Library. The cryptographer Jim Reeds was the first one who actually managed to break the code in the back of the book in 2006. The code turned out to be a list of astrological terms and magical spells, as well as more names of demons and angels. But even though he was able to read the last 36 pages, many people believe he didn't interpret what he read correctly. Otherwise, he would allegedly be able to do real magic. The Grand Grimoire of Cthulhu. The Grand Grimoire of Cthulhu is a modern spellbook for the 21st century. It's filled with over 550 spells that are said to give their wielder unlimited power. The book is also packed with advice and guidance, the items needed to cast spells, different magical components, and details about astronomical situations. The book discusses folk magic, ley lines, and so much more. It's also a guidebook for a tabletop game kind of like Dungeons & Dragons, so don't get your hopes up too high that any of these spells will work in real life. Chachaboyas Mummies. Throughout history, every culture has had burial processes and procedures, varying from group to group and religion to religion. However, it would be relatively unusual today to bury a family member in an upright sarcophagus that is shaped in a vaguely human form and have it keep watch over the neighborhood. But for the Chachapoyas culture of ancient Peru, this was the norm. Dubbed the Machu Picchu of the North, Cuelap was a pre-Incan walled settlement located on a Peruvian mountaintop cliffside. It was built by a mysterious culture called the Chachapoyas, also known as the Cloud People or the Cloud Warriors. They started building the site during the 6th century, roughly 500 years before Machu Picchu emerged into existence. This city also sits at a much higher altitude than Machu Picchu, at roughly 9,843 feet above sea level. Cuelap was just one of many Chachapoyas settlements. At its peak, it was home to an estimated 3,000 residents, while the Chachapoyas civilization consisted of as many as 500,000 people. Experts know relatively little about this elusive culture, and much of what they did know until somewhat recently was gleaned from the stories of Spanish conquistadors, whose accuracy is questionable. Archaeological excavations are on the rise, however, and are helping experts learn more about the civilization. Chachapoyas mummies were placed into sarcophagi that were decorated with spooky humanoid faces, which were housed inside cottages on difficult-to-access cliffs. Based on the burials, it seems as though the Chachapoyas people lacked a distinctive hierarchy. In addition to the burials themselves being elaborate yet rather egalitarian, there are a few symbols throughout the culture's settlements that seem to emphasize status or power. Who's up for a visit to Chachapoyas? Let me know in the comments below. The Salt Men of Iran. Over 1,700 years ago, a group of men were working together in a mine in what is now Iran, when the roof collapsed and crushed them to death. None of them were discovered until 1993, when miners at the Cherabad salt mine in Zanjan province found the first body, belonging to a man with long, flowing white hair and sporting a gold earring. His remains didn't look nearly as old as radiocarbon dating proved them to be, leading experts to believe that the dryness of the environment helped to preserve his body while the surrounding salt sucked moisture from his skin. In other words, the man was naturally mummified. 5 more salt men, as they've come to be known as, have been found since then. The second mummy was discovered just 50 feet away from the first in 2004, and in 2005, 2 more were found. The last 2, one of which is actually a woman, were discovered in 2007. Mining practices were stopped at the site in 2008, and it was declared an archaeological site, making it available to researchers. Experts have learned a lot from the mummies, some of whom were so well preserved their internal organs remained intact. One man's stomach contained tapeworm eggs, showing that he ate lots of raw and undercooked meat. Other artifacts were remarkably well preserved thanks to the salt, including a leather boot containing a foot, iron knives, a pant leg, a silver needle, a sling, leather rope, pottery shards, textile fragments, a walnut, and more. 4 of the 6 mummies are currently on display in the positions they were found in at the Archaeology Museum in Zanjan. Frozen, sacrificed children. Around 500 years ago, 3 Inca children aged 13, 7, and 6 were chosen for the gruesome honor of being sacrificed to the gods. As part of the ancient ritual, known as Capacocha, the oldest spent around a year being prepared for her death. Dubbed the Yuyayako Maiden, the teenage peasant lived under the guidance of priestesses, increasingly ingesting alcohol and coca and enjoying elite foods like maize and meat. When it was time to die, the kids, including the 2 younger children dubbed Yuyayako Boy and Lightning Girl, received copious amounts of drugs and alcohol, possibly to pacify them and make them more cooperative with their impending fate. They were led to the summit of Volcan Yuyayako in what is now Argentina, where they died peacefully in the freezing weather. In 1999, a team of researchers ventured high into the Andes and discovered the deceased children, who were remarkably preserved thanks to the frigid, high-altitude conditions. Their hair, skin, and clothing were intact, bringing a human element to their deaths that does not usually come with ancient remains. Chewed coca leaves were found in the Yuyayako maiden's mouth, and the lice in her hair was still visible. There were no signs of violence, an otherwise common feature of Capacocha sites, indicating that the kids were left in a drug-induced stupor or were perhaps even unconscious and quietly slipped away. Textiles, pottery, and gold, silver, and shell statues surrounded the trio. Today, the mummies are on display at the Museum of High-Altitude Archaeology in Argentina, where guests can see them firsthand and attempt to wrap their minds around how anyone, at any point in history, could consider the needless death of a child to be honorable. Why do you think ancient people did this? Let me know your theories in the comments below. The Begging Bowl. The Begging Bowl is an ornate Tibetan skull, or kapala, that was used for rituals. It resembles a monkey's cranium and is gilded and elaborately decorated. Tibetan monks once used all types of skulls, including those of humans, to appease the spirits and as offering plates for wine, bread, and blood, which were believed to drive away the evil spirits. During the 1950s, a Chicago area man brought the begging bowl to the United States. He regularly fed wine to the skull to avoid feeling tormented by the artifact. He stored it in a locking box with a knife drawer on the bottom. The begging bowl's age is unknown. Its owner passed it down to his grandson, who neglected to feed the skull as his grandfather had. Then, at some point, the knife in the lower drawer disappeared. The skull's new owner began sensing a heavy electric air around the artifact, and it made him incredibly uneasy. To distance himself from the begging bowl, he donated it to the Traveling Museum of the Paranormal and the Occult, owned by paranormal investigators Dana and Greg Newkirk. Do you think the begging bowl is haunted? Let me know in the comments. The Crying Boy painting. The curse of the crying boy began during the 1950s, when Giovanni Bragolin, an Italian artist, created a series of portraits of a tearful little boy in honor of World War II orphans. These paintings were popular in England, where they were mass-produced and sold throughout the country. In September 1985, news broke of a couple named Ron and Mary Hall losing their home to a fire, with their copy of the Crying Boy painting being the only item to survive. Peter Hall, Ron's brother and a firefighter, claimed that he had been to many fires where everything but the Crying Boy was destroyed. People responded overwhelmingly to the news article, and mass hysteria ensued. The next morning alone, hundreds of readers had contacted the newspaper with their own stories of the Crying Boy painting remaining intact after a devastating fire. Some claimed that the artwork had even killed a loved one, while others said that they tried burning it and it wouldn't catch fire. Not everyone bought into the superstition, including Alan Wilkinson, a firefighter who blamed the repeated fires on carelessness, while also admitting to attending over 50 Crying Boy blazes since 1973. So, did the painting cause fires, or were the paintings just so popular that everybody had one? In response to the widespread panic, Calvin Mackenzie, editor of The Sun at the time, told readers to send their Crying Boy paintings into the publication. While some people claimed that the artwork would not light on fire, newspaper staff had no problem burning over 2,500 copies that Halloween. The hysteria eventually died down, but the curse of the Crying Boy remained very much alive and well to some, and many still wonder if it's real. What do you think is the explanation for the many fires where this painting survived? Coincidence or something more sinister? Let me know your theories in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. We've got lots more videos coming up. Observation Post Rock. Observation Post Rock is a mud fort that was once controlled by the Taliban. Located in Afghanistan's Helmand province, the 30-foot-high mound offers an advantageous view over the landscape below. It eventually became a post for U.S. Marines and British soldiers. When the Marines blew up the mound and the tunnels collapsed, Lance Corporal Brendan Kelly noticed the hill's ancient design, which consists of small tunnels leading to a single chamber. He believes that the structure may have originally been a fort or a tomb. Bones have been found at the site in the years following the blast. They were initially thought to be the remains of Taliban insurgents who died in the tunnel collapse, but it turns out that the bones are decades or even centuries older than that. A local researcher who spoke with journalists Thomas Gibbons Neff and Taimur Shah said that the mound is, in fact, an ancient burial ground. Experts believe that it was built sometime before 1740, and nobody knows who built it. The rock was used as a cemetery until around 1980, when 40 communist Afghan police officers were brutally executed there. Sometime after 2008, the site gained a reputation for being haunted. Soldiers who were stationed there reported seeing mysterious lights, hearing bizarre static on their radios, strange lights and sounds, sudden changes in temperature, and getting an uneasy feeling. Former Lance Corporal Jose Herrera told the New York Times that there was an overwhelming odor of death, especially at night. At first, the soldiers' superiors were quick to blame combat-induced anxiety for the alleged paranormal encounters, but so many soldiers claimed to have these experiences that their stories became believable. The Bassano Vase. The dark tale of a 15th century silver vase called the Bassano Vase started when a bride in Napoli, Italy received it as a wedding gift, but she never made it to the altar. Someone murdered her on her wedding night with the vase in her hands. Oddly, many significant details are missing from the story, including the bride's name and the name of the man she was supposed to marry. And why would she have a vase in her hands? The Bassano vase was passed down through the woman's family, and everyone who owned it seemed to perish tragically. Eventually, one of the owners put the vase in the ground, presumably to distance themselves from the evil artifact as much as possible. The artifact reappeared centuries later in 1988, when a young man supposedly dug it up wherever its previous owners had buried it, at a location that has never been named. It was accompanied by a note stating, "Beware, this vase brings death." It was auctioned off at an undisclosed auction house with the note conveniently left out of its description, and it sold for $2,250 to an unnamed pharmacist, who died less than 3 months later. 3 of the vase's subsequent owners reportedly died tragically. Nobody knows exactly what ultimately happened to the allegedly cursed object. Legend holds that its last owner threw it out a window in a desperate attempt to get away from it, and the vase fell onto a police officer below. The individual was fined for littering and gladly paid the fine, but wanted nothing to do with the vase. Police supposedly attempted to place it in a museum, but failed, because no establishments wanted to risk being subjected to its curse. Someone supposedly buried the vase at an undisclosed location, where it remains today. Mass child sacrifice. Between 2011 and 2019, archaeologists unearthed the remains of 269 children and 3 adults from the Chimu culture at the Huanchaquito Las Llamas site in northeastern Peru. The individuals died over 500 years ago, sometime between 1400 and 1450, in the largest known child sacrifice ever found. Local pizzeria owner Michael Spano alerted archaeologist Gabriel Prieto after human bones began emerging in a vacant lot near his home. Excavations ensued, and Prieto quickly noticed that the graves were unlike typical Chimu culture burials. Instead of being positioned upright according to custom, they were laid on their backs or curled up on their sides, and many had cut marks on their sternum and ribs. While pottery and other grave goods were conspicuously absent, the children were buried alongside llamas and alpacas, which were extremely valuable to the Chimu people as a food source and for transportation. Like the children, the animals were killed via a cut across the sternum. The Chimu culture is shrouded in mystery, complicating researchers' ability to determine precisely what happened on the horrifying day when the children were massacred. With no written records left behind, archaeologists must rely on physical evidence and observations that the Spanish recorded after arriving in the region. And until the mass grave was discovered, there were no signs that the Chimu even sacrificed children. Experts suspect that an altered climate, including higher seas, heavy rains, and severe effects of El Niño, may have ravaged the civilization's economic and political stability, causing the Chimu to sacrifice some of their most valuable assets, namely children and animals, in a desperate plea for relief from the gods. The Anguished Man. Considered to be one of the world's most haunted artifacts, a frightening oil painting called The Anguished Man was created by an unknown artist at an unknown time, who allegedly used paint mixed with human blood. The painting ended up in the hands of a man in northern England named Sean Robinson, who got it from his grandmother after a friend had given it to her. Robinson's wife disliked the painting, so for some time he kept it in their basement. Finally, in 2010, he brought it upstairs and moved it into the bedroom. Despite Robinson having had the painting for over 30 years, it was after bringing it upstairs that his family started experiencing its haunting effects. They claim that it makes terrifying noises at night, including groans, screams, and what sounds like fabric tearing. The family has also witnessed a shadowy figure in their home and heard whispers and crying. Some people accuse the Robinsons of making up the story about the artwork in a bid to gain fame, but even many who doubt the credibility of the story would admittedly never take their chances by hanging it in their home. Would you? The Ben Stone. The Ben Stone was sacred to the Egyptians, who kept it in a temple dedicated to the god Atum in the ancient city of Heliopolis. Ben is also a term that's used to describe the tip of an obelisk or the capstone of a pyramid. There are several creation stories in ancient Egyptian mythology. According to one, the Ben stone rose from the dark waters of a primordial abyss called Nu, where it served as a landing place for Atum. At the time, the world consisted only of darkness and chaos. Upon landing, Atum realized that he was all alone, and that the world was a rather depressing place. He began creating life and gods, and had them take over the creation process while he remained on the Ben stone. At some point, Atum began to worry about the gods he had created, so he removed his eye and sent it on a search mission. The eye returned with the gods, causing Atum to shed tears of joy onto the stone, which then turned into people. If the original Ben stone ever really existed, it's since been lost. Some say that the artifact itself and the city it was located in, Heliopolis, were made by aliens. The conspiracy theories associated with ancient Egyptian culture abound, and this is simply one of many. Perhaps because this ancient culture had such fascinating and iconic symbols, structures, and cultural practices that alien intervention seems to be the only explanation. Zersiven Castle. Located in modern-day Turkey's Diyarbakir province, Zersiven Castle is a remote ruin that sits atop a hill overlooking a vast plain. It dates back 3,000 years and has been destroyed and rebuilt several times since it fell under Assyrian control during ancient times. The structure was last rebuilt during the Roman era, during which time it had a legion of 1,200 soldiers. Zersiven was abandoned after falling under Islamic rule and has remained uninhabited for some 1,400 years. Excavations that took place in 2014 found everything in its original place. The castle and its contents were astonishingly intact, thanks to not being used or touched in so long. Inside the castle there is a temple of Mithras. There are only 22 such temples known throughout the world, and the one at Zersiven is the best preserved of them all. Mithraism is older than Christianity. It's a mysterious ancient Roman religion that worshipped the god Mithras and placed a high importance on the celestial bodies. It inspired the soldiers at Zersiven Castle to take an interest in the night sky and involved secret rituals and initiations. Archaeologists have found numerous symbols here that they can't explain or find in any historical sources. They believe that the symbols have something to do with the Mithras cult. There are rumors throughout the province that several American families whose names frequently pop up in conspiracy theories have visited the temple at Zersiven and participated in strange rituals. Whatever the case, it seems as though the experts agree on the site's importance. Zersiven Castle was added to UNESCO's World Heritage tentative list last year and reportedly has a high chance of entering the permanent list. Bet's Mystery Sphere. In 1974, a family living in Fort George Island, Florida, claimed to have found a strange metal sphere in their backyard. Measuring 8 inches in diameter and weighing 22 pounds, it was smaller and heavier than a bowling ball. At first, the family believed that it was a cannonball left behind by Spanish colonizers, but the object, nicknamed the Bet's Mystery Sphere after its finders, was unusually clean and shiny for an object that old, or that had been sitting in the ground for that long. It also seemed to be made of stainless steel, which was not used during the colonial period. On top of all that, the sphere seemed to have a mind of its own. Out of nowhere, it began moving around on its own, vibrating and making unexplainable noises. When one family member played the guitar, the ball reacted by making a throbbing noise. One day, while the Betts family rolled the ball back and forth on the floor, it randomly changed directions and returned to the person who rolled it last. The family's dog also responded strangely to the sphere by crying and covering her ears with her paws. The U.S. military supposedly ran their own tests on the ball. Speaking with local papers, household matriarch Jerry Betts had claimed that an independent examiner found radio waves and a magnetic field surrounding the object. A Navy spokesperson, on the other hand, told the newspaper that while they were unable to identify the sphere, they believe that it's man-made and that it's harmless. Conspiracy theorists believe that the ball was created using advanced ancient alien technology. To this day, however, the claims about its strange behavior remain questionable, leading most to agree with the military's conclusion that it's an ordinary object. What do you think about this mysterious sphere? Let me know in the comments below. The Georgia Guidestones. In Elbert County, Georgia, there is a collection of 6 granite tablets arranged in the shape of a star. Known as the Georgia Guidestones and nicknamed the American Stonehenge, they are engraved with a series of rules that their commissioner believes people need to follow in order to restore humanity after an apocalypse. At the top of the monument, there is a short message written in 4 languages: Greek, Babylonian cuneiform, Sanskrit, and Egyptian hieroglyphics. The rules themselves are written in 8 languages, including English, Spanish, Swahili, Hindi, Hebrew, Arabic, Chinese, and Russian. Included among the 10 guidelines are rules such as balance personal rights with social duties, rule passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason, and be not a cancer on the earth, leave room for nature. In 1979, a man wishing to conceal his identity hired a local granite finishing company to build a monument containing instructions for the re-establishment of society. The parties involved agreed to destroy the structure's plans once it was built. The strange man went by the pseudonym R.C. Christian and had seemingly limitless money for the project. He insisted on all information regarding his identity being strictly withheld from the public. There are several conspiracy theories about who he was, including rumors that the New World Order or the Satanists were behind the Guidestones. These far-flung ideas have led to extreme vandalism, but have not brought anyone closer to identifying the monument's real commissioner. To this day, all that's known about the anonymous sponsor is that they are, according to a statement on the monument itself, a small group of Americans who seek the age of reason. So, who do you think might be behind the commission of these rules for re-establishing society after an apocalypse? Leave your theories or guesses in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss any more videos. The Wedge of Ayude. The Wedge of Ayude is an out-of-place artifact, something that doesn't fit the time, place, or context in which it is found. Discovered in Romania in 1974, the 4 to 5 pound aluminum wedge supposedly dates back at least 11,000 years to a time long before aluminum was discovered. A group of construction workers reportedly discovered the wedge buried beneath 35 feet of sand, alongside 2 mastodon bones. An anonymous donor gifted the item to the Museum of History of Transylvania, where it sat unacknowledged in a storage room until 1995, when editors from a UFO magazine rediscovered it. Based on the mastodon bones it was found next to, the stone could be anywhere from 11,000 to several million years old. But it hasn't been scientifically dated, and there could perhaps be another explanation for why the object was found where it was. Metallic aluminum did not exist until 1825, causing many people to dive headfirst into theories about the wedge having extraterrestrial origins. Some pseudoscience enthusiasts believe that it's a piece of landing gear from an ancient alien spacecraft. Others think that a time traveler from the future left the wedge behind during a hasty departure to escape a mastodon attack. Much to the dismay of conspiracy theorists, the wedge is most likely a tooth shed from an excavator, and is indeed very modern in origin. It appears aged because it's made of a type of aluminum that oxidizes rapidly, but there is little doubt among experts that the wedge is anything but ancient, and that it probably fell off a construction machine. Chinese sword in North America. In 2014, an amateur artifact hunter allegedly discovered a partially exposed ancient Chinese sword beside a stream in the state of Georgia. It's one of several seemingly Chinese artifacts that have turned up in the United States in recent years. The 12-inch-long weapon was provisionally identified as being made from a rare mineral called lizardite, which is found in both the northern and southern hemispheres. But more tests are needed to determine the material's type and origin with any certainty. The sword is reportedly the only object of its type ever found in North America. To some, this means that people traveled to the continent from China during the pre-Columbian era. If this were to be true, it would rewrite history and our understanding of past human movement. But tests showed that the soil around the sword was disturbed at some point, and experts have failed to identify many of the symbols and shapes on the sword. Some scholars contend that the artifact reflects a possible connection between ancient Chinese and Olmec symbolism. The debate has been ongoing for over a century. Unfortunately, there is little follow-up to articles announcing the sword's discovery in 2015, leaving the world to wonder if it is a genuine artifact, and if so, when and where it came from. But it's probably safe to say that mainstream experts didn't buy into the hype, or we'd be hearing a lot more about it. The London Hammer. While out for a walk with his secret lover in London, Texas in 1936, a man named Max Hahn discovered an artifact made from wood and iron embedded in a 400-million-year-old rock. It's been inconclusively dated to sometime between 700 years ago and today, leaving the question of how it ended up in such an ancient rock formation. Hahn and his girlfriend allegedly noticed some loose rock during their walk and pulled a chunk out of it. They took the piece home, where it sat for a decade, until the couple's son, Max Jr., broke the rock open and found the hammer inside. Archaeologists are skeptical about the discovery, to say the least, especially since it went unnoticed for so many years while in Hahn's possession. Christian theorists suggest that the hammer is a pre-flood artifact that was used by a society that lived amongst the dinosaurs. Other experts contend that the hammer is consistent with 19th century tools that were used in the area. Today, the object is on display at the Creation Evidence Museum in Texas, perhaps indicating that the scientific community doesn't want anything to do with it. Ancient African artifacts in South America. Some researchers believe it's possible that Africans made contact with people in South America long before Christopher Columbus sailed to the New World in 1492. According to one theory, a king named Abukari II led a voyage to the continent from what is now Mali around 1300, and some scholars even believe that Africans reached South America much earlier than that. Writing for an African publication in 2018, Nduta Waweru claimed that archaeologists have discovered artifacts in South America that indicate an African presence as far back as sometime between 13,000 BC and 600 AD. Evidence suggests that people from Aksum, Meroe, and the land of Punt settled in South America during that time period, according to Waweru, who said that African skulls have been found in Ecuador, Chile, and Peru. Plus, there are alleged similarities between African and South American religions that may point toward the possibility of pre-Columbian contact, including images of their gods. There are also correlations between early medical practices found on both continents, such as trepanning, which involved drilling holes in the skull to relieve pressure on the brain. Archaeologists have reportedly found pots and water jars from the land of Punt off the South American coast, and Columbus himself supposedly described the people he encountered as dark-skinned. These claims haven't been proven and are widely rejected by mainstream experts, but more people are opening their minds to the possibility as the narrative of who arrived in the Americas first, after Native Americans, constantly changes as we learn more about history. There are also theories that people from other continents, including Asia, Oceania, and Europe, beat Columbus to the Americas. So far, researchers have already proven that the Vikings set foot in North America long before Columbus did. But if some of these other beliefs are true, they could rewind the arrival of outsiders to the New World not just by hundreds, but perhaps thousands of years. The Droba Stones. Legend holds that in 1938, an archaeologist named Dr. Chi Pu Te discovered 716 stone discs inside a cave during an expedition to China's Bayan Har Mountains. Measuring 9 inches in diameter, they were covered in little grooves and hieroglyphics. When played on a record player, the discs supposedly emitted a low-frequency humming sound. A professor reportedly claimed that the discs, known as the Droba Stones, featured stories of a UFO crash landing near the caves 12,000 years ago. The spacecraft's crew, known as the Droba aliens, tried to build new lives on Earth, but were hunted and killed by the locals. When nobody believed the professor's claims, he resigned from his job. The Droba Stones disappeared and haven't been seen since. Mainstream experts reject this story entirely, arguing that the artifacts are merely the product of a long-standing tall tale. The archaeologist and professor who allegedly found and studied the stones were never proven to have existed, and the same goes for the Droba Stones themselves. The story of these artifacts first surfaced in 1960 and was published again in 1962 and 64. 2 versions of it credit a false news agency as their source, but the claims nevertheless spread, and many people believe that the Droba Stones are real, including conspiracy theorists and people who don't like to fact-check. What do you think? Did these strange ancient discs actually exist and were then covered up? Maybe the story got twisted? Or is the whole thing a hoax? Let me know in the comments below.
The plague collapse. As all of us learned in 2020, a plague could very easily wipe out all life on Earth, at least all human life. A more contagious virus could end up killing millions, and believe it or not, it wouldn't be the first time. Archaeologists recently uncovered the body of a woman from a tomb in Sweden. She lived and died 5,000 years ago, during a time when the first farmers were settling Europe. When researchers took a closer look at her remains, they found that she had been infected by the same bacterium that causes the Black Plague. That's the same Black Plague that killed off about 3/4 of the European population during the Middle Ages. This particular bacterium was from a previously unknown branch that scientists had never seen before. They believed that 5,000 years ago, a completely different strain of the plague from the Middle Ages swept through Stone Age settlements in Europe and caused civilization to come to a grinding halt. Because this happened so long ago, there is no way to know for sure if the plague really did wipe out a huge portion of Europeans. But it is probable. The only saving grace for humanity back then was that international travel wasn't really a thing. But there were other plagues that came after, like the Justinian plague that nearly crippled the Roman Empire in the 6th century, and of course the Black Death in the 1800s. If another one of these deadly plagues were to pop up today, it would be COVID-19 times 1,000. Scientists believe that a new form of disease could wipe out the majority of humanity, just like plagues and viruses have for thousands of years. World War III. The Second World War may not have destroyed the world, but a third one certainly could. The raw fact is that humans are currently in the longest peaceful era of our globalized civilization, without constant wars raging across the entire world. There are conflicts in some places, but nothing like the consistent battles fought throughout past history. Some say this peaceful time is about to come to a grinding halt. If World War III were to break out today, chances are it would have something to do with a phenomenon known as the Thucydides trap. The term was first popularized by the famous American political scientist Graham T. Allison. The premise is that war almost always erupts when an emerging power threatens the current major power, either in a region or globally. Today, that means the People's Republic of China surpassing the United States of America in terms of wealth, as the power of the US more or less declines. When this kind of situation arises, war almost always seems to follow. What I'm about to say next is far from fact, but this is just what the experts are hypothesizing. If there were to be an outbreak of World War III, it could happen with China's attempted reunification of Taiwan, or with Russia's blatant invasion of Ukraine. These things could even happen at the exact same time, which could result in nuclear war between all the major players. If nukes start to fly, we could be facing a nuclear winter in which nobody is left standing except the cockroaches. A great flood. It's hard to imagine a flood so immense that the entire world is covered in water and everybody either quickly evolves gills or dies. And yet it can potentially happen. There could be floods on a global scale because there have even been miniature floods in the past that have killed millions. For example, there was severe flooding in Hankou, China back in September of 1931. Torrential rains produced the most devastating flood in the history of the country, bursting the Yangtze River and the Yellow River. By the end of the floods, there had been 3.7 million deaths. Those who didn't die from floods died from famine and outbreaks of disease like typhoid fever. As for the big flood that could potentially destroy humanity, it's unlikely to happen anytime in the near future, but it is a possibility later on. In fact, geologists agree that there was a great flood in the Middle East at the end of the Ice Age, sometime around 7,000 years ago. The European glaciers melted and poured into Europe, causing the sea to overflow with an incredible force over 200 times greater than what you see at Niagara Falls today. It was so fast that the water would have swept away anything in its path. This could be the great flood mentioned in the Bible, the one that Noah built his ark for. And if you think that's a totally ridiculous theory, just listen to this. According to the National Oceanography Center, the water levels rose over 360 feet during the end of the last ice age. This was between 19,000 and 6,000 years ago. It happened slowly, with the sea level only rising about 3 feet per year. But it did happen, and with currently rising sea levels, we could already be in the process of this kind of flooding over time. Do you think a flood of these proportions could happen again? Let me know in the comments below. Killer asteroid. There is a killer asteroid heading straight towards our planet right now that has the potential to wipe humanity off the map. And yes, it would be very similar to the event that killed off the dinosaurs 66 million years before today. During the International Academy of Astronautics 2019 Planetary Defense Conference, experts agreed that at some point the Earth will get hit by another big asteroid. But they also went on to say that they don't know when that will be, only that the event will be catastrophic. Bill Nye the Science Guy even said it will be like hitting Control-Alt-Delete for everything. Or in even simpler terms, humanity will be deleted. If an asteroid the size of the one that killed the dinosaurs hits the planet, everybody in the immediate vicinity and for hundreds of miles around would instantly be killed by the shockwave. The asteroid could cause volcanoes to erupt and could even trigger earthquakes across the planet. The result would be a cloud of debris so thick that it blocks out the sun for years. Plants would die, we would fall into a premature ice age, and everyone would probably die. The only good news is that NASA is keeping their telescopes trained on the sky, watching for any threats that could be coming close to us. When one is detected, scientists can, at the very least, attempt to figure out the best way to get rid of it. Whether that means shooting the asteroid with lasers, attempting to plant explosives on the surface, or some other innovative method. The Mark of the Beast. There is a very bizarre conspiracy theory going around right now that has to do with COVID-19, coronavirus vaccines, and the Book of Revelation. For those who don't know, the Book of Revelation is the one that talks about the end of the world and the rapture. It's written in the New Testament that the Mark of the Beast will herald the beginning of the end. In the Bible, it says the Mark of the Beast will be something that all people are marked with if they wish to engage in commerce. Some say that COVID-19 vaccine requirements meet this criteria. Whether this truly is the Mark of the Beast or not, remember this is still just a conspiracy theory. Nevertheless, there are millions of religious people across the world who believe the end is coming according to the Book of Revelations. Once the Mark of the Beast has been seen, the 4 horsemen will ride. A war will arise to make everyone kill each other. A great famine will cause even more horrors than the war, and then there will be a great earthquake. The sun will turn black, and the stars will fall from the sky. Then the trumpets will sound, signaling the angels to come and take those still dedicated to God up to their place in heaven. And, depending on your beliefs, that is very well how the world might end. Have you ever heard of this before? Do you believe it? Let us know in the comments below. The dead ocean. The more the ocean is polluted, the closer the human species is to dying out. A lot of people don't think about how much we rely on the ocean, but we rely on it so much that if it's gone, so are we. We eat fish that come from the ocean. We breathe a huge amount of oxygen that the ocean helps to create, and its currents keep us warm. Without a healthy ocean, we simply cannot survive as we do now, and unfortunately, the ocean is in rough shape. By 2050, it's estimated that there will be more plastic than fish in the ocean. According to the Natural History Museum, we only have 10% of the marlin, tuna, and sharks that we had in the 1950s. This is a 90% decrease in certain types of fish. The disruption has consequences throughout the entire ocean ecosystem, such as jellyfish taking over the seas as fish populations crash. But perhaps the biggest issue with having a continuously dying ocean is that the water continues to become more acidic. Compared to pre-industrial levels, ocean acidity has already increased 25%. According to the US Environmental Protection Agency, ocean acidity is already greater than it's ever been in the past 2 million years. What that means is that the ocean might become so much like acid that it literally burns the fish, as if they were swimming in pure toxic waste. It also means the ocean will no longer produce oxygen, so we can no longer breathe. Which theory sounds scariest to you so far? How do you think the world is going to end? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. We have lots more videos for you to check out. The Super Volcano. As we speak, NASA is hard at work trying to come up with a way to prevent the complete annihilation of humanity in the case of a supervolcano eruption. A supervolcano is one like Yellowstone, which happens to erupt every 600,000 years or so. Coincidentally, it's been 600,000 years since its last eruption, give or take a few centuries. If Yellowstone were to erupt tomorrow, it would be so devastating that human civilization would simply cease to exist. This is why NASA is trying to figure out how to prevent an explosion from ever happening. But there are other supervolcanoes across the Earth that we also need to fear, with an eruption coming from one of them every 100,000 years. We're extremely lucky that one hasn't erupted during modern times. Just 200 million years ago, a supervolcano erupted and killed 75% of all species on Earth. When this event occurs, it won't be lava that spreads across the entire circumference of the globe and boils everyone. It will be the fallout and the pollution. The amount of CO2 that will be spat into the atmosphere will immediately ruin the environment. There would also be volcanic ash, which is basically just dust and glass, stuck in the atmosphere like a great umbrella. If Yellowstone erupted, pretty much all of the USA would be covered in several feet of this ash, making it impossible for plants to grow, people to eat, or anything to keep living. Robot takeover. There is always the potential that we don't kill ourselves with nuclear war, that we manage to save the environment, and that we develop all the necessary systems to keep nature from swallowing us. In this hypothetical universe, there is a chance that after we conquer the natural world, our own artificial creations rise up and crush humanity. This would be a robot takeover. And according to Elon Musk, artificial intelligence is going to be smarter than human beings by the year 2025. He said this in an interview with the New York Times. Musk says that before we know it, artificial intelligence could very well wipe out humanity without even thinking about it. He's even gone so far as to say that AI is more dangerous than nuclear weapons, and that currently there is nobody overseeing the development of artificial intelligence, which makes it that much more dangerous. Of course, this hasn't actually happened yet. The truth is that a self-driving car can't even run autonomously without accidentally running somebody over. And for anyone who plays video games, you'll know that the AI isn't really this hot most of the time. While Elon says we could be destroyed by AI, the chances of it happening by 2025 are slim. The solar flare. The sun may be the whole reason why we're alive in the first place, but it also could spell the end of civilization as we know it. I'm talking about solar storms and solar flares. A solar flare is a sudden burst of electromagnetic energy that comes directly from the sun. And while it's true that even the biggest solar flare couldn't technically destroy the planet with its energy, it could wipe out the electric grid. The sun is so far away that not even the explosive heat caused from an eruption of a solar flare can reach our planet. It's only the radiation and particles that travel all the way here. If a big solar flare hit in the next few years, it could cause GPS disruption, every last electric transformer to blow out, and the entire power grid to shut down. Satellites would be done, anything with a chip in it would be fried, the internet would be extinct, and it could take decades to get the system back going. This wouldn't technically end civilization, but it would lead to a situation in which our society would undoubtedly crumble. We could erupt into chaos and violence, then spiral into a post-apocalyptic hellscape. Either that, or maybe we would all work together to build a utopia. Too hot to live. Humanity could finally be wiped out if we reach 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. The United Nations Panel for Climate Change says that the world is already heating up to 1.1 degrees higher than levels of pre-industrial Earth. We're on a runaway track to 1.5. And while this is an extremely complicated issue, the gist of it is that the Earth will become too hot for humans to live on. But it's not only heat that will be an issue. Yes, all the forests could burn down, and it could get so hot that humans literally drop dead if they go out in the sun for more than a few seconds. But there are other climate disasters, such as global drought, which is currently happening with 70% more frequency than about a decade ago. We are also receiving 30% more frequent heavy rainfalls, which leads to an insane amount of flooding and crop failure. The bare-bones truth is that once we hit 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels, things will spiral until we hit 4 degrees. At that point, there's not really much humanity could do. The entire planet will be so hot that nothing will grow anymore. The sea level will rise over 30 feet within a short period of time, and all the coral reefs will be gone. It's a no-way-out scenario for humanity. How do you think the world is going to end? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and be sure to hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching, and see you again soon for another awesome video. Bye.